Welcome, everyone. My name is Michael Socolow, and I'm the director of the McGillicuddy Humanities Center here at the University of Maine. And I'm very pleased and excited to be introducing you today to our center and some of the work of humanities scholars at the University of Maine. I'd like to begin today's event with the University of Maine's official acknowledgement of the land. The University of Maine recognizes that it is located on Marsh Island in the homeland of the Penobscot Nation, where issues of water and territorial rights and encroachment upon sacred sites are ongoing. Penobscot homeland is connected to the other Wabanaki tribal nations, the Passamaquoddy, Maliseet, and Micmac, through kinship, alliances, and diplomacy. The university also recognizes that the Penobscot Nation and the other Wabanaki tribal nations are distinct, sovereign, legal, and political entities with their own powers of self-governance and self-determination. Thank you. Now, it is my great pleasure and honor to introduce Dr. Joan Ferrini-Mundy, the president of the University of Maine and the University of Maine at Machias, and the vice chancellor for research and innovation for the University of Maine system. Dr. Ferrini-Mundy, thank you very much for joining and participating today.
Thank you, Dr. Socolow, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be able to be with you today and to join in this wonderful event. The fact that the McGillicuddy Humanities Center has as a mission, quote, to demonstrate the immediacy and applicability of humanities studies by advancing teaching, research, and public engagement in the humanities in Maine, and that the center supports programs that foster intellectual curiosity, critical reflection, and creative innovation. That mission is being evidenced today in the theme of and the content of this event. And so I'm very proud of our center, which does phenomenally good work and makes certain that our university puts its focus, as it needs to, on understanding the human condition through the humanities in a way that that moves us forward in significant and important ways. The center began, as many of you will know, in 2010 as an initiative that emerged from the university's strategic planning activity at the time, the Blue Sky Project, initiated by President Ferguson, and took its rightful place as a full-blown research center over time because of the very high quality work that it advocates and promotes and helps us to move forward. In 2017, the center was named in honor of Clement and Linda McGillicuddy, who began so very generously supporting the center through the University of Maine Foundation, and that support continues, and we're very grateful for it. The center has received an award from the National Endowment for the Humanities to create a Wabanaki digital resources portal in collaboration with several community partners, evidence of its incredible quality and impact nationally, as well as, of course, in the state of Maine. So I'm delighted to be able to be here to congratulate the staff and team at the center for putting together this wonderful event. To note that in the spring of 2022, the center will celebrate its 10th anniversary and certainly has come of age in an important way as a central resource and essentially a leader for our thinking here at the University of Maine and well beyond, and taking up vital and diverse subjects that span everything from Black political activism and abolitionism in 19th century Maine to Wabanaki language and culture, and to the state of Maine's bicentennial, and so much more. So with that, I wish to thank you. This is a tremendous opportunity to keep learning, all of us together. So with that, I believe my next step is to introduce a video presented by our Governor Janet Mills, where she will present a poetry reading. Am I right, Michael? That's what I'm supposed to do? Okay, thank you to Governor Mills.
This is Governor Janet Mills. I'd like to read a new poem by Wes McNair with his permission. Wes, as you know, was Poet Laureate of the state of Maine and a dear friend to all. He wrote this poem. It's called On the Rocks in the Pandemic. After Lois Griswold's iPhone picture taken by chance on Short Sands Beach in York, Maine, July 2020. That photo was of the men forming a chain to save a drowning diver successfully. Here's the poem. Who are they? Where did they come from? All of a sudden, these men flung together on the rocks of the distant shore, grasping hands, some without shoes, another who swam for the distressed diver, shirtless as he reaches his arms out to start the chain, with all the rest, all strangers, yet intimate in a way their bodies know. The young man near the front twisted back toward the diver, the old man midway, spreading his legs to lean far enough in the opposite direction he could fall, except for the shared balance of their anonymous human will and compassion and togetherness, one to the next and the next, to the extended hand at the edge of the photograph, and to all the other hands we cannot see. Thank you.
What a wonderful poem. All right. Thank you very much, President Ferrini-Mundy. All right, I'd like to tell you now a little bit about the humanities and the McGillicuddy Humanities Center in today's event. The humanities is the name for the academic and creative disciplines that inquire and explore the human condition through a variety of methods and media. So, for example, philosophy or literary criticism or history might be theoretical or applied, but the essential issues they raise and the questions they ask center upon our lives, our cultures, our societies, and even our human existence. But this might sound really lofty. We often take the humanities for granted. For the humanities also encompasses those discussions we have after we see a good film or read a good novel or discuss with our friends why we like a new song we just heard. We practice the humanities and humanistic inquiry daily, even if we don't call it that. Our center began, as you heard, as the University of Maine Humanities Initiative, and it became an official research center in 2012. Next year is our 10th anniversary. We're very excited. And over this past decade, we've encouraged and supported so many subjects over diverse academic disciplines. We've also collaborated with community partners. We've hosted art exhibitions, poetry readings, historical tours, and other events. And this past year, our humanities specialist, Karen Sieber, working closely with Dr. Margot Lukens, our previous director, played a key role in securing the center's first National Endowment for the Humanities grant, which you just heard about, the Wabanaki Digital Resources Portal, which we will be working on in collaboration with such partners as Fogler Library, the College of Education and Human Development, Native American programs at UMaine, members of the Wabanaki Confederacy and the Wabanaki Studies Working Group, the Maine Department of Education, Abbey Museum in Bar Harbor, and others. Our center has a monthly newsletter during the academic year in which we detail our events, list grant opportunities for scholars, and offer humanities news updates. So please drop us an email at mhc@maine.edu if you'd like to be included in that list or hear more from us. Okay, now to introduce the first of the presenters today who will be describing their humanities endeavors. If you have any questions, by the way, related to any of the speakers in today's program, please feel free to put them in the Q&A during the talks. Dr. Craig T. Ettinger is an associate professor of anthropology and the director of the Maine Folklife Center and the Maine Studies Program. And today he's speaking about the Jack Pine Community Art Project that the center began in response to the Maine Folklife Center began in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Craig?
Thanks very much, Michael. Thank you, President Ferrini-Mundy. Last spring, like many people, we were in the process of adjusting to the pandemic and had no idea what lie ahead in the months to come. But I had already been interested in the arts and the role that the arts can play in our society, and specifically with respect to telling a story. Telling the story of Maine, for example, in a speaker series that some of you might have attended, called Framing Maine. We had people like Dave Mallett and Bill Green and Paul Dwaran and others come and talk to us about how art can help frame the place where we live by telling stories about it and depicting it in certain ways. So I knew about the power of art in that way. And I also had some idea about the power of art as a form of healing. So talking with some other people at the university, I conceived the idea of the Jack Pine Project. The imagery of the Jack Pine is of a tree that reseeds itself after wildfires. In fact, its seeds need the heat of a wildfire frequently in order to open and to germinate. So I saw that as a symbolic of the reemergence of the state of Maine following the pandemic. Of course, this was about April or May. I had no idea that it would take a year or more to do so. But nevertheless, I began looking around for partners at the university and found that the Fred Hutchinson Center, part of the Division of Lifelong Learning, a wonderful center in Belfast, Maine, was willing to collaborate on this project and provide a lot of the needed support. What we did was we reached out to the arts community in Maine, artists, but also art educators and music therapists and others, and asked them to develop a set of workshops. And those workshops would work with ordinary people, untrained in the arts, or at least in their specific art, and would help them talk about, process, convey their feelings about, tell the story about the pandemic using their own words, their own images, their own songs, etc. And over the following few months, we did about 10 different workshops in all different kinds of media and allowed people to tell their stories in this way. It was very powerful. It reached out to some audiences that aren't often represented in the stories that we tell about our state. For example, currently incarcerated veterans, cancer patients, special needs adults, alternative education high school students, others whose voices are typically not heard when we go around looking for the stories that define us as a state or as a people. So these workshops were conducted over a period of a few months, and I just want to highlight a couple of them today, given the time. I'll first I'm going to share my screen and show you our website so that you can have a sense of what to look for if you happen to go looking for our project. If you want to do a Google search for us or find us quickly, just type in the words, one word, jackpineproject.com. But it will take you to the Maine Studies website where we have a description of the project and the various workshops that we did. And I'm just going to talk about a couple of them in particular. One of the workshops that was my favorite, and I'll just show you a little bit about that, was something called mind mapping. And we had somebody who is actually a graduate student at the University of Maine in the Maine Studies program, and she's an art teacher and an alternative high school teacher in the Waterville area. And she worked with people to have them actually create what she calls mind maps, where they depict themselves surrounded by their various fears of the pandemic or their hopes for the future, and then create these poster-size images, collages in some cases, drawings in others, which helps tell that story. And it was fascinating to learn this perspective that some of these people had about the things that were occurring around them as they saw it. So I invite you to go and read about that. Another workshop, and we did two events this spring, co-sponsored by the Hutchinson Center, where we had the workshop instructors talk about their workshops, and I'll mention them quickly here. One is a set of songwriting workshops that we had, one both by music therapists, one named Kate Beaver in the Portland area and the other by Carla Tangay in the Ellsworth area. And Carla specifically worked with cancer patients in the Ellsworth area to help them tell their story, which is dealing with the threat of a severe illness on top of compromised immune systems, chemotherapy, and so forth. They created a song together, and I invite you to click on that workshop and look at that song on YouTube. It's very moving. And the final workshop I'll mention is one that was conducted by a man who's very well known in Maine's theater community, Stephen Legavietz, who is the founder of the Camden Shakespeare Festival. Stephen reached out to a number of people that he knew in Maine's theater arts sector. And working with 10 of them, they created a series of dramatic monologues which told their stories about the pandemic. They created these over a period of about 8 weeks. They each wrote their own narrative, and then as actors, they memorized and performed it and recorded themselves doing so. So in about final 2 minutes, assuming that the audio works correctly here, and I suppose I'll get a thumbs up or not from one of my co-panelists, I want to play just 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes of Seth Rigoletti's monologue.
It was the first weekend in August, and I was hiking through a section of the AT with my 16-year-old son. I needed an excuse to get him out of the house, away from the screens, and we thought that backpacking overnight in the Mahoosucs was a good idea. And it was the second day, and we were hiking down. He was really far ahead when this thing happened. I was coming down a rocky ledge and a thru hiker, she was coming up. And I thought she had plenty of room to pass and stay safe, but I could tell by the look on her face that she was in distress. And as she passed, she yelled, "Climbers have rights!" The words didn't make sense to me right away, but the feeling was clear, and I stopped and she stopped, and rather than feel angry or embarrassed, I just felt so tired. I could tell by her face that she was expecting a confrontation, but that didn't happen. Something just softened between us, and she just started to apologize. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." I think I know what she meant. I feel as though my patience for myself and for others is just frayed thin. Even grocery shopping feels like entering in a combat zone. You know, early on in the pandemic, when Hannaford first taped those green arrows on the floor, I overheard a giant of a man telling a bunch of other customers about a confrontation he had had with another shopper earlier in the week. I guess the other guy was going the wrong way down the aisle, and the giant flipped over his cart. Oh, in the paper, there was a story about a man who pulled a gun on two shoppers in a grocery store. I guess something about masks. You know, people have been shot at and tear gassed throughout the summer protesting racial injustice, but the rest of us, we're getting into shoving matches over deli meats and pandemic etiquette. It just all feels so brittle.
I'll stop it there. It goes on a little bit longer. And for those who want to see it, if you go to our website, there's a link that takes you to all 10 monologues on our YouTube channel. So I'd be happy for you to take a look at those. And there's also the two events that we did this spring, the Songwriters Workshop and Stephen Legavietz. And I interviewed several of the actors who did these monologues. So those links are available on our website as well. The purpose of the project was to do three things, and I'll wrap up. One was to help tell the story of the pandemic, but through the arts specifically, as opposed to through ethnographic interviewing or something like that. To provide a little bit of subsistence or sustenance, for some of the many artists who lost income as a result of the pandemic. And finally, to help use the arts as a form of healing and processing the trauma, the anguish, the uncertainty, the fear, the anger, as Seth shows there, through the arts. They're very powerful and one of the tools that we have as humans to process things that are otherwise nearly impossible to process. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Craig. That was wonderful. Okay. Those mind maps, fascinating, fascinating. Okay, now I'd like to introduce Dr. Catherine Swaha, who is an assistant professor of English and who joined us at UMaine in the fall of 2019. Dr. Swaha studies the rhetoric of health medicine, rhetorical theory, and she teaches professional and technical writing. Today, she's going to tell us about her Coping with COVID project. Dr. Swaha?
Thank you so much, Michael, and President Ferrini-Mundy and all the organizers and sponsors of this event. And also a special thank you to the McGillicuddy Humanities Center, which has generously funded the project I'm going to share with you today, which is called the Coping with COVID project. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Hopefully this will work. Thumbs up if you can see my screen. Good, okay. So this project invites participants to share images and stories of how they interpret COVID-related public health guidelines on a daily basis. And just to note, all of the images that you'll see to the right of the screen are submitted by project participants, and they include brief excerpts of the stories that they also submitted. And inviting participants to share images and stories of their lived experiences, this project really tries to get to that central question of this panel. What is the relevance of the humanities and humanistic inquiry for public health? And And I think some might say, okay, yes, it's nice to share stories, but what is the relevance of that for public health practice or public health communication? And that's what this project really tries to get at. It participates in a push to encourage greater dialogue between public health experts and their scientifically based knowledge with community members' everyday lived experiences. And those experiences, of course, depend not only on scientific knowledge, but also other cultural, social, material, embodied forms of knowledge that heavily influence behavior. And one way to initiate that dialogue between public health and community members is through a humanity-based, participatory, and story-driven approach. Drawing from Indigenous storytelling practices, technical communication scholars Emily Legge and Patricia Sullivan argue stories as knowledge-making praxis create a thread and leave traces between the teller and the listener. The story does not act as a thing, but creates a movement of knowledge between the members of the storytelling frame. While the teller creates the narrative frame and begins the story, the listener enters into that frame and brings along understandings and contexts to make the story relevant to their own frames. So stories and the way that we share them as active participants in an ongoing exchange are not just something that's nice to hear, but are also integrally tied up with how we negotiate different forms of knowledge to make decisions and take action in daily life. So stories understood in this way can be a really useful methodology for public health communication and practice by placing experts and community members in conversation with one another, where, as Legge and Sullivan suggest, each party can bring their relevant frames to that exchange to create something that's meaningful to each. And the Coping with COVID project embraces this idea of storytelling as a methodology. And it's both an IRB approved study that seeks data-driven implications for public health communication and a space for public storytelling and exchange about daily life during the pandemic, specifically as it's related to following public health guidelines. So here you can see another image submitted to the project along with a brief excerpt. And then you can also see a screenshot from the project website where participants can browse stories that have been submitted to the project. Through the website, they can also share their own story, find resources that have been compiled based on some of the implications expressed in the stories that have been submitted. And then folks can also learn more about the project through this website. So there's been 62 participants in the project so far. They've come from across the US and they range in age from 18 to 70. But just in the interest of time, I'm just going to dive into two of these stories. And I've purposely selected stories submitted by students here at UMaine as a context with which we're all familiar. And I've abbreviated the stories just a bit for the sake of time. But after I share them, I'll then leave us with some implications in terms of public health communication and practice. So this slide shows a story submitted in October of 2020, and it's alongside one of the corresponding images that the participants submitted. Untitled by Anonymous. The last picture is of my swearing into the Army. It was a very big moment for me that was changed slightly due to COVID-19. I was required to wear a mask during it, as was everyone involved and my friends and coach who came out to support me. The whole wearing mask for me doesn't really do anything. If anything, it almost ruins simple pleasures. Like I have a nice photo of me in front of the American flag in uniform during my ceremony, but I had to wear a mask and look stupid. Hiking Katahdin, my friend and I chose a horrible, windy, rainy day to hike, so no one else was on the mountain, so we didn't wear a mask at all during our hike. So I think this story shows that we have a participant who was clearly not completely on board with COVID-related public health guidelines. And yet, despite some clear resistance, we can also see her trying to navigate those recommendations rather than completely dismissing them. So for example, when she writes about not wearing a mask when she's hiking Katahdin, we can see on one hand what we might call noncompliance. The story was submitted when we had a blanket mask mandate. And yet on the other hand, she also suggests that she chose a horrible, windy, rainy day to hike, so no one else was on the mountain, which indicates an effort on some level to maintain social distance. So rather than a strict dichotomy between compliance and noncompliance, which is how we tend to think about adherence to public health recommendations, we have what we might call lived negotiations between the two. And those negotiations not only involve social and cultural factors, but are also deeply tied to her sense of place. So she deems it safe to not wear a mask on Katahdin. And then later in her story, she writes about not wearing one in social gatherings at her apartment, where she presumably feels at home. And those negotiations are also very much tied to how she views her larger personal story. I think we can see some subtlety here in that she's specifically opposed to wearing a mask during her swearing-in ceremony, which of course would be a significant life event. She calls it a very big moment for me. And she feels then that the mask made her look stupid. So her understanding of the mask is something that she's viewing in terms of its role within how she views the larger story of her life and how she wants it to be remembered. So I'd call how she's relating to certain guidelines here a type of emplaced story negotiation. So it depends both on her sense of place and on how she views the larger story of her life. And we can see this type of emplaced story negotiation in another story submitted by a UMaine student earlier in the fall of 2020. The College Try by Nate. It feels odd as an RA to be enforcing rules that hinder students in building interpersonal relationships. With that said, if being the buzzkill that asks students to pull their masks over their noses and sit farther apart is what it takes to keep Orono off the New York Times list of college town outbreaks, then so be it. UMaine is not a hellscape of booze and maskless debauchery, contrary to the way that some universities are justifiably being portrayed in the national media. Neither are our students the most well-behaved, conscientious folks on the Eastern Seaboard. They are not the bright, diverse, eye-smiling, mask-wearing citizens skipping down the mall as if nothing is wrong that you might see in a university advertisement. They sit too close together, their masks fall under their noses, they go over to their friends' apartments, and some of them, God help me, still don't wash their hands. But as I sit here in the neutered reading room of Fogler Library writing this, I don't see any of that. I see a bunch of barely adults doing about the most that I would ever suggest you ask of them, trying. So here, this participant doesn't show as much clear resistance to public health guidelines as we saw in the last story, but I think this story similarly shows negotiations between public health recommendations and daily life that are what we might call both emplaced and storied. So for example, we can understand his concern with being labeled as a buzzkill as a concern over how his persona is being represented in social stories circulating among his peer group. But then he also navigates that concern by weighing it with how the larger story of UMaine as a campus with relatively low case rates is being told in the national media, as well as in other forms of communication, such as university advertisements. So this participant is very attentive to those larger stories being told and to his sense of place, and he negotiates those as he makes daily decisions about how to act and behave. So what are some implications of stories like these for public health communication in practice? I think that storytelling projects like this one can help us to reorientate our approach to public health communication by conceptualizing it as participatory, so an exchange, a dialogue between public health and community members, emplaced, something that deeply depends on our sense of place, and storied, something that we deal with every day and sort of build into the fabric of how we see our larger life stories. And I think reconceptualizing public health communication in this way can not only help us bring greater dialogue between public health experts and community members, but can also lead to some very tangible recommendations for public health messaging, such as encouraging audience participation, making messages resonate with both individual users and larger community stories and sense of place, and acknowledging other types of knowledge and experience beyond rational and scientific knowledge. And you can see some examples of what these principles might look like in terms of COVID messaging on the right, but I think these principles can also apply to other public health contexts and public health communication. And I'd be happy to talk more about the project and about some of these implications in the Q&A, but I'll leave us there for now for the sake of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Baha. What an excellent example of applied communication, public health communication. All right. Now I'd like to introduce a colleague and a friend and a great supporter of the humanities at the University of Maine, Catherine Olmsted. Kathy Olmsted was a colleague of mine in the Department of Communication and Journalism when I first arrived in Orono, although I believe she had just become an associate dean in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences just as I started. Her career, both in our department and in the dean's office, was remarkable. And I don't have time to tell you all the highlights, although one I recall fondly was her commitment to the Center for Student Journalism when its annual conference for high school journalists in Maine. Kathy ran it every year out of our department. Kathy's also an author, and her recent book, True North, Finding the Essence of Aroostook, collects her essays and commentaries that were published in the Bangor Daily News and Echoes magazine, and it's a wonderful read. Today, Kathy's going to talk about her support for the humanities. She's currently the co-chair of the McGillicuddy Center's Board of Advisors, and she's also a member of our patron circle, having generously started the Echoes of Maine Humanities Fund and the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences Scholarship Fund. So I've asked Kathy to speak a bit today about the humanities and why she thinks they're important. Kathy?
Thank you, Michael. Supporting the arts and humanities. This is my story. Once upon a time, I was one of 2 associate deans in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences at the University of Maine. One of my responsibilities was to select recipients for scholarships created by funds associated with different departments in the college. Each year, I gathered together previous associate deans, both retired and still teaching, to help me with the task. I was astonished by how little went to students in departments like English, history, and music, compared to those like physics, math, or computer science. I wanted to help level the playing field. So I created a scholarship through the University of Maine Foundation in 2005 for students in the arts and humanities, with a preference for those with financial need. I contributed to it every year, first from appreciated stocks and then from my IRA. I had no idea how much this scholarship would mean to the students who received it until I began to receive thank you letters from them. Here are some quotes from a few of those letters. I am an out-of-state student from Charlotte, Michigan, double majoring in secondary education, social studies, and history. UMaine may be far from home, but coming to Maine is the best decision I've ever made. And you have helped me continue living this dream. My goal is to continue at UMaine for a master's in higher education. I'm also thinking about law school with a focus on child law. Thank you again for assisting me on my journey to get an education and help everyone around me. One day, I hope to help students like you have helped me. As a first-generation, low-income student, your support helps me focus on my studies rather than tuition burdens. Thank you. Sincerely, Marlana, class of 2021. I am a sophomore history major from Holden, Massachusetts. I would like to formally thank you profusely for your donations to this fund. This is a huge help to me, as I am in need of financial assistance in order to attend college and get my degree. I came to the University of Maine originally as a political science major, but have switched interests to history. With a degree in history, I have a few possible plans, either to attend law school and become a criminal lawyer if I get into a good enough law program, or further my education in history and become a history professor. I have had a great experience with the university's history program so far. I have been academically challenged by the material, but teachers have worked with me well, kept me interested and engaged, and so far ensured that I have success in the program. It is because of help like this and donations from people like you that make it possible for students like me to pursue their career ambitions and become successful participants in society. So I just wanted to thank you again for your generous contributions and let you know that I appreciate it and will make it count with future success. Very respectfully, Jack. I have received the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences scholarship, and I am writing to thank you. I come from a poor household, and this has greatly eased the burden of attending university, not only economically, but mentally. The ease of mind that comes with knowing my debt won't weigh me down in the future makes it much easier to work towards my dream of becoming a psychologist and being financially stable. Thank you for being a helping hand in this venture and bringing some of that stability to my life now and I promise to make good use of it. Sincerely, Thompson. I am honored to receive this scholarship and am grateful for the opportunities it will provide for me, both in the present and the future. I have lived in Maine all my life, primarily in Searsmont, which is along the mid-coast. I was excited to attend the University of Maine and have enjoyed my experience there so far. I am a psychology and communication sciences and disorders double major. My goal is to graduate next spring and then attend graduate school to get a master's degree and become a speech language pathologist. Your contribution has helped me finish out my undergraduate years with less financial burden. I am so grateful and appreciative to you for donating money to the Liberal Arts and Sciences Scholarship Fund. I know that I have directly benefited from your contribution, and many other students do as well. With help from donors like you, I am able to focus on my studies more and do well in my classes. Again, thank you so much for the scholarship. I hope that in the future, I can also give back to students just like you have. Sincerely, Olivia. I hope that my story gives you an idea of the value of supporting the arts and humanities.
Thank you, Kathy. That was lovely. Wonderful. And it's interesting, you know, you're so generous also with your time. I asked you to help copy edit, use your expertise to help copy edit our annual report. So thank you. The center really owes so much to you and the college as well.
To hear them speak, you would think I gave a lot more than I did.
Thank you very much, Kathy. All right. All right. I'd now like to present the last project we'll be discussing in today's program. This project began last summer when we were all stuck in our homes as the pandemic forced us and forced the state into a shutdown. And I was thinking, I just started as the director of the McGillicuddy Humanities Center. And I was thinking about the kind of project the center might do that could help people in the future understand this unprecedented moment. Being a former journalist and an historian, I naturally thought of interviews, oral histories, testimonies that might be useful as primary source materials by future scholars. So I was discussing this idea with Matt Mullen from the University of Maine Foundation, and he put me in touch with Doug Baston, University of Maine class of 1969, who was also thinking of supporting a similar project. So together we conceived of the Maine Remembers the Coronavirus Project. And last fall, with Doug's support, we recorded and produced a pilot video. I'd like to share that with you now to give you a sense of the project. Okay.
My name is Abigail Carroll. I grew up in Orono, and now I have an oyster farm in Scarborough, Maine. The oyster industry obviously has been hugely impacted by the pandemic because we rely so much on restaurants. And without restaurants, our market really dries up pretty quickly. In the first few weeks of the pandemic, we went from 12,000 a week oysters in sales to nothing. And then at one point I thought, oh, maybe I should start calling people. And so slowly I started, calling my clients, and slowly they started picking up sales again. But, and we had a decent summer, but now we're looking at the fall and a lot of uncertainty again as diners have to go back inside, and we just don't know what the future is.
My name is Angela Okafor. I own an international market, Tropical Taste and Style. Okafor Law Practice, Angela's Hair Braiding and Crafts. It's been a struggle having to I could have stayed open though, but having kids and being held at home with me, little kids especially, it has slowed a lot of things down for me. It has affected a lot of my income, and it's been a lot, especially, but my most struggle is usually, childcare around everything for me.
The pandemic has affected the book industry greatly. We've seen a lot of independent bookstores across the country need to close due to just low business and other safety concerns. Here at the Briar Patch, we have been able to maintain some level of business since the pandemic started, although we continue to not, at this point, have people inside the store. We've had to pivot and figure out how to reach customers and have customers be able to reach us, to be able to give them the things that they're looking for, whether it's reading material, educational material for their children and families, and doing so through curbside service or new online services. It's really made us really kind of think about how we do business and, again, how to close up those holes that the pandemic has created for us.
Well, I have to say, Mainers are usually living in Maine because they enjoy a certain amount of social distancing naturally.
I think a lot of Mainers are used to some level of isolation when we have long winters or we live in more rural areas. There are many people that don't come into town, so to speak, from other parts of the state, except for maybe once or twice a month. That type of isolation, people are used to relying on themselves, used to stocking up and having the supplies they need to get by through months of winter or months of work that they can't get away from if they're working on farms and things like that. And I think that sort of adds to Mainers' ability to get through the pandemic differently. I think what the future will have a hard time remembering about the pandemic is the day-to-day life.
I think it's going to be really easy in a year or two or longer for us to sort of reduce the pandemic to a time when our groceries were delivered and we sat home watching Netflix. I think it'll be easy maybe to forget just the level of stress we feel on a daily basis and how our inability to congregate as we're used to really affects us and wears down on us. And, I didn't know I was a hugger before the pandemic, and it turns out I'm a hugger. Who knew? But I miss those really personal opportunities to engage with people I would hug and even people that I would normally see in day-to-day life, just especially at the heart of the shutdown where we really weren't leaving our houses very much. Gosh, seeing the face of the postman, having a casual conversation with the baker, these are the day-to-day, sort of interactions that make our lives special and happy.
I really do not think there is anything that wouldn't be remembered in the future about this pandemic because, different people are going through the struggles of this pandemic in different ways. And I believe they will hand down their stories and experiences in the same different ways. So I really do not believe that there will be anything forgotten actually about this pandemic.
I would ask that the future really take a look at what we've gone through this pandemic, the preparations, the warnings, and understand that you don't know what's going to come. So to learn from the past is so important. If we had really kind of looked at what other countries and even this country has done in previous pandemics years ago, then I think maybe we could have taken this a little more seriously and kept the pandemic from continuing to spread and respread throughout the country.
Okay. So that's the pilot video, and it's our hope to interview more subjects and make those transcripts available through Folkler Library's COVID-19 archive over the next year. So look for updates about that in our newsletter. Okay, so that's an introduction to some of the humanities research and creative work we're doing at the University of Maine and some of the work that we support through the McGillicuddy Humanities Center. I would love to hear from you. Any ideas you have, thoughts on today's programs or future projects for us? Our email address is mhc@maine.edu. And let me just see if you have any questions or thoughts about the presentation. I'm looking in the Q&A, but see, we don't have an open question. So I will skip ahead. And thank you for coming today. I'd like to thank Governor Mills and thank President Ferrini-Mundy, Vice President for Research and Dean of the Graduate School, Dr. Cody Baramian, and Tammy Crosby for inviting our center to participate in today's event and to talk about what the humanities are and how we at the University of Maine are supporting them in different ways through different projects. Now remember, this was only one aspect of the way of the projects we do. This was the ones that applied to the COVID pandemic, but we do all kinds of things related to the state of Maine, Native American programs, all kinds of things. And so please check out our website. Please get in contact with us at mhc.maine@maine.edu or Michael.
Michael, you have a question
in
the Q&A.
Oh, thank you. Okay. You mentioned funds that support students. Can you talk about fellowships? Yes, yes, undergraduate fellowships at the University of Maine, and thank you for asking that. So we have an undergraduate fellowship program at the center. It is 4 students a semester are selected, 8 a year. It is one of the premier undergraduate humanities research fellowships in the United States. It provides $4,000 of support per semester per student, so $8,000 for a student per year to do independent humanities research and scholarship or creative activities. So what it allows is for self-directed, motivated students to work with a faculty member very closely and do very high-level research or creative activities that really are rare in the United States at the undergraduate level. So some of our undergraduate fellows, and the program is run by our humanities specialist, and some of the projects are just fascinating. So for instance, our current fellows, one current fellows is going to be looking at homelessness in Bangor and in Maine and thinking about it and interviewing the people involved in it. Another is looking at self-help, the whole self-help industry, and looking at it rhetorically and as a communication device, and whether the self-help industry actually may not be helping us. Another, our inaugural Richard and Karen Anderson Fellow is going to be doing an art exhibit that in the spring, I believe it's the spring of 2022, hopefully, cross our fingers, we'll all be through this pandemic, we'll have an exhibit in Lord Hall that we'll be inviting everybody to, called about how it's sort of theological and artistic about how the gods think about things. That's Haley Santerre. And so our undergraduate fellows programs, and if there are any undergraduates here today, or if there's any faculty members from the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, you also, one of the things that we really like about our fellowship program is you don't have to be a humanities major. The project simply has to be humanities based. So faculty members from other departments or engineers or STEM or other majors who are interested in the idea of memory or thinking about memory, or I'm just using that as the example for today, or the way we talk about COVID-19 or things like that. We would love to see those kind of projects. So the deadlines for both faculty grants and the undergraduate fellows program are March 17th and October 17th every year. So thank you for that. And I see we have another question. Did anyone here at the University of Maine study the complex reasons behind the baby bust caused by the pandemic? Great question, and I'm going to have to refer that to Katie Swaha, if that's okay, because I am not up to speed on the health communication at UMaine on it.
That's a great question, and the answer is not that I know of. So there might be someone studying that, but I haven't heard. But that's a really interesting question that I think we could look at from both the health communication standpoint, or I can imagine an interesting project in psychology or sociology, history maybe. But yes, I don't know. I haven't heard of anything. And in my project, there haven't been any references to babies one way or the other in the stories that have been submitted through my project. So that's an interesting question that unfortunately, I'm sorry, I can't answer.
But I'd actually like to mention one of our esteemed faculty colleagues, Amy Blackstone, the chair of sociology, is the author of Child Free by Choice, I believe. I'm pretty sure that's the name of the book. Child Free by Choice. It was a popular trade publication. She's been interviewed widely. I think there was an excerpt or an interview with her in Time magazine. She's really, truly one of the nation's experts in the sort of conscious choice of being child-free, changing the rhetoric we use from childless to child-free and those kind of things. That's Dr. Amy Blackstone, the chair of sociology. A wonderful work that's gotten a lot of national attention. Good. All right. Excellent questions. Thank you. And so I guess that's where we will end our program. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Governor Mills, President Ferrini-Mundy, Vice President for Research and Dean of the Graduate School, Dr. Cody Varamian, and Tammy Crosby for inviting our center to participate in today's event. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend and a summer that looks like a return to normal, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you again.